Welcome to For the Record. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Allen Rose. In this episode, we're going to talk about a topic that has become increasingly rare in our politics: civility. From heated exchanges online to the growing divides we see in our own communities, it feels harder than ever to have meaningful conversations across differences. To help explore this issue, I sat down with Oklahoma State Representative Daniel Pae. He's known for his bipartisan approach and commitment to respectful dialogue. Representative Pae shared his thoughts on what civility really means, how it plays out at the Oklahoma State Capitol, and what each of us can do to bridge divides in our own conversations. This is For the Record. Representative Pae, thank you for joining me on this very important topic. To start this conversation, let's start with the big picture. When you hear the term political civility, what does it mean to you personally?
Well, thank you, Justin, for the opportunity to have this conversation. There's no doubt that we're living in very polarized times as a country. Certainly in our adult lifetimes, I don't think we've ever been this divided before. And it seems that every election cycle that I've put my name on the ballot and I've just witnessed as a citizen, the temperature keeps on rising. So when I think about political civility, I think about basic values and ideas I learned in elementary school. You got to listen to the other person. You have to respect the other person. And you may not agree with the other person 100%, but you have to maintain that open line of communication. And if you go back to the founding of this country, there was significant disagreement that the founders had about the structure of government. And for example, you had the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. Lies. And that's how we have the House and Senate bicameral structure that is present in our Congress, in our state legislatures. So we definitely need more civility. And I'm a firm believer in, this is ironic to say, but I believe in in-person conversations. And certainly I appreciate the role technology has played the past several years to facilitate that. But nothing beats just looking someone in the eye and sitting down over coffee or a meal and breaking bread. We're not seeing that happen very often nowadays, especially two people of opposite political preferences. And that's a very dangerous path to be on if we don't change direction. So I'm still hopeful that we're at a point now where we realize that keeping on this path of making things personal and especially with social media amplifying a lot of extreme viewpoints and vitriol, that is not a recipe for success for our country.
Why do you think we have found ourselves in such a time where, as you mentioned, some Democrats and some Republicans don't really want to have those conversations? I mean, sometimes I see them having it online, but they never tend to end how we really want them to end in terms of civility. I mean, I even seen some polls where one end of the political spectrum says they would never ever date someone from the other end of that political spectrum. So, Daniel, how have we gotten here? How in our community have we gotten to this point where we are not really valuing political civility anymore?
There's a great book that came out when I was in college, and it talked about, and it's called Bowling Alone, but as far as you have people moving to neighborhoods and communities that look like them, think like them. And I think over the past several decades, that's certainly contributed where we now find many folks within echo chambers, both physically and digitally. And so having conversations with people who are of different backgrounds and political parties, I do believe that's a big reason why that's not happening as frequently as it used to. And you take Congress, for example, where throughout most of the 20th century, up until the 90s, the congressional schedule was that you were mostly in Washington, D.C., and so you had to move your families with you. And both Democrats and Republicans got to know each other and their families on a personal level. They had barbecues, sporting events together, those sorts of things. And since by the time I was born in 1995, the schedule was where you had to fly in and fly out essentially throughout the week. And that did not lead to those personal relationships being developed, that respect, that civility in the long run. And now you have people who just primarily know each other via social media and what their caricature is on the news. And I've met people who on the news or on social media, they have a very different personality than in real life. I do think that the echo chamber of social media comment section certainly plays a big role in what we're facing. And I would also submit that we have tremendous demographic changes happening right now in the country. It is a fact that by the midpoint of this century, we're going to be a majority minority society, and we can live in denial between now and then, or we can acknowledge reality and have difficult conversations on any given subject matter and preserve those lines of communication that I've mentioned. The choice is ours. But I think it's not just technology. I think it's a lot of the demographic trends and how people are trying to adjust to that transition point. All those sorts of things are why I see us in the current predicament.
You mentioned Congress in that answer about how they used to have more close knit family ties across the aisle, and how those sorts of interactions humanize people. They truly do. But what about the Oklahoma State Capitol? How would you characterize or describe the tone at the Oklahoma State Capitol?
Yeah, and a lot of people think that I reside in Washington D.C. and I fly to and from the national capital, which is obviously not true. I primarily drive to and from Oklahoma City and the state capital, and we have a very truncated session timeline, February through May, because we are technically part time, much like other states are when it comes to legislatures. And I mentioned before we hopped on that I was in Washington, D.C. the past few days, getting briefings from different cabinet agencies. And a couple of the secretaries talked about the Oklahoma Standard and what happened after the bombing in 1995, and how that's a moment where we do have to remember and learn from when it comes to domestic terrorism what the extreme outcome could be. And the folks mentioned how we came together, Democrats, Republicans, young, old, urban, rural, it doesn't matter. We all came together because we realized the significance of that tragedy. And since then, we have become a model for how do we reconcile, how do we move on in a productive way, embracing each other's similarities and not being divided by our differences. So I think that's what separates us from other legislatures. Now, is there partisanship? Do we have disagreement on policy? Yes. And in fact, I was on the panel Monday before I left with a colleague on the other side of the aisle. And I think you've met him, my friend Representative Arturo Alonso. He and I worked together on AI policy over the years. And we're both young state representatives on opposite sides of the political spectrum. But we still have things we agree on, and we're able to have a conversation side by side. And that should be the model for the rest of the country. So for the past 7 years, my experience has been even folks who I vehemently disagree on one or two different issues, I still try to find ways to work with them because that's how we can keep functioning as a state government.
Okay, so twofold question here. Some people listening to that answer might say, I don't see how, I would be able to do that. They might think I really disagree on a personal level, and I don't see how I can have a conversation with that person. So how do you personally get past those sorts of thoughts? And two, what sort of policy victories do you see take place in your experience when those hard conversations across party lines are truly had?
So I think in general, the idea of empathy, that's got to carry through those conversations, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And as an elected, there is mutual respect in that we all put our names on the ballots, all our families and friends endure a vigorous campaign process toward ultimate victory. And so there is that bond we have and that mutual respect. So working over the years with different colleagues from various walks of life. I mentioned Arturo, who's closer to my age, but I have other colleagues who have more life experience. I do want to learn from them as well. So I don't take things personal. There are some times where colleagues will vote for me and others not, and that's okay. We all have different constituencies and different viewpoints. I don't keep track of who's voting for or against my bill. That's very juvenile, and every policy has to be considered on its own merits. Practically speaking, I found that asking for someone's favorite cuisine and favorite TV show, that's led to some interesting conversations and how we've bonded. And I'll tell you, there's a member who we've become quite close with. He is certainly more conservative than I am, but we always talk about Star Wars and what's going on in that universe. And in fact, he and I worked together on a bill related to homeless youth this past session. And he did bring up what I consider a legitimate concern about how do you verify that a student is in fact homeless. And he and I worked together along with another member on fine-tuning the language. And I have no doubts because of that personal foundation we have over a common interest that we were able to work well side by side. So I think getting to know someone as a human being, first and foremost, that sets the stage for future friendship and a great working relationship. So I think just finding something in common in terms of hobbies or interests, breaking the ice that way. That's how I found success over the years. And then just being realistic that we're all different human beings. We're not going to be 100% on the same page, which I'm not quite married yet. Hopefully for that season of life at some point later down the road. But from all my friends who have been married for a while, there are disagreements and there will be fierce discussions about any given topic, but that line of communication is still open. In a marriage, you're not going to be 100% all the time in alignment, but trying to work through those periods of time, that's how a marriage sustains, I think, within a political system, certainly the same way. Having 10 different bullet points and saying that if you don't agree with all 10 bullet points, that you're insufficiently liberal or conservative. I just don't think that's a productive way to govern. And I fully recognize some people do operate that way. I just don't think they're going to get very far if that's their attitude. And I think Ronald Reagan said it best that someone who agrees with you 80% of the time and disagrees with you 20% of the time, that's your friend, not your enemy.
So, what can Oklahomans really do to try to bridge that gap and have respectful conversations as both voters and constituents? I know Oklahoma is majority red, but there are still differences out there in the public. I see it all day long in the comment section or on our Facebook page. So, what can the public do to be more civil toward both politicians as well as their own neighbors?
So I think the last point you mentioned, certainly checking in with your neighbors, with your friends and your loved ones, I think that's fundamental right there. I always read on the news as we're about to enter the holiday season that a lot of the chairs around the dining room table are empty around Thanksgiving and Christmas because family members no longer talk to each other, want to be around each other because of politics. And that's just sad to sever those relationships. So I do think it starts at home. It starts in your neighborhoods, in communities where we can have open minds and be willing to talk. And it doesn't have to be a formal town hall meeting per se. I can tell you that if I've been at Walmart or the gym, I've had many great conversations about current events. And with all the travel I've done this past summer with conferences, there have been moments where, in fact, going to a conference on youth homelessness just last week, there was a woman sitting next to me on the plane who's from Duncan, and she said that she had seen me on KSWO and wished me well. So it doesn't have to be in a formal setting; it can be in your everyday settings where you have those honest conversations. And I think social media going back to that point where there's not a lot of opportunity for nuance in a tweet. That's what I would submit. And I think there's a lot of value when it comes to looking someone face to face over a cup of coffee, sharing a meal, whatever the case may be, and perhaps understanding why a person has a certain position on any given issue. Not trying to, you're not going to be in 100% alignment at the end of that conversation, but at least trying to figure out why do they have that perspective, and maybe you learn something from that. And you had mentioned voter participation. We just had an election in Lawton, and I think there was a little under 2,000 people total who voted, and we had 3 city council races. We had a couple ballot initiatives. So it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback since we're in football season. I'll use that analogy. But it's another thing to actually step up to vote, not just when there's a presidential election. I understand there's a lot of passion and fervor every 4 years for that type of election cycle. But for your city council, for your school board, for state legislature, we need to make sure we have that same level of enthusiasm and interest. If we can have packed stadiums for OU and OSU college football games, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a tremendous number of people voting in our elections too. Because there are a lot of people who know a lot of facts about sports and pop culture, and we need to have the same level of interest for our politics. And by being better informed and by having that intellectual curiosity as voters, as citizens, I think that opens the door for even more opportunity for bringing people together and then finding that consensus.
You mentioned in that last answer low voter turnout. Now, there is this very interesting research in political science, and I'm sure you read some of it, that this research looks at negative campaigning and the effects of it on turnout. Now, it's very interesting. We have seen mixed results in this research field. Earlier on, it was thought to actually decrease turnout. But now research is showing the opposite. And it actually shows that negative campaigning could increase, could actually motivate voters to turn out in any given election. Now, the main reason why I wanted to have you on, Representative Pae, to talk about political civility is because you have made it a point to never throw dirt during your campaigns, whether it is within your own speeches or your campaign materials. So why was it so important for you when we live in an era where everybody, every politician seems so willing to throw dirt? Why was it important to you to never do so?
Yeah, and so I'll address the first part of that question. I do agree that there comes a point of diminishing returns, that if a candidate is so negative against the other candidate, and always talking about what they're against and not what they're for, yeah, the voters are turned off. And I would point to the 2022 election cycle with Governor Kevin Stitt, where there was so many negative ads, millions and millions of dollars spent against him, that I had heard directly from folks who initially were not supporting him, but because of the negativity, they felt bad for the guy and they developed sympathy. And they thought, surely he can't be that bad of a human being. And it got to the point where some of the ads were straight off of The Onion. It was just very, very hyperbolic, and a lot of Photoshop wasn't well done. Those sorts of things. So I do believe there is that point of diminishing return when it comes to negative campaigning, and people just tune out at a certain point. As for me, it is true that even when I was running for class president at Lawton High, I never indulged in negative campaigning. Never have. I don't really plan on changing that, because I think if that's what you're willing to do just to win a title, I think that's sad. I think there's more to life than that. And I personally better use some of my time than trying to figure out how to criticize and attack someone. I've got other things to do and take care of. And so that's why I've always campaigned that way. And, I'm not naive, and I understand that there has been negative campaigning since the inception of our country too. A lot of folks have done it over the past 250 years. I just believe in a different approach where you should be talking about what you're for, What have you done for your constituency if you're an incumbent? If you're running for the first time, what do you bring to the table that's different from your other opponents? I'd rather focus on the issues, on one's merits, what skill sets there are, and I think just being realistic in that none of us are perfect. We're all humans, but for one reason or another, we decided to put our name on the ballot, and that's for public service at its essence. That we are all everyday people, and we just felt motivated to want to jump into the political arena. And Teddy Roosevelt, he has a great quote talking about being in the arena, and it's that person who counts, not so much the critic who stands on the sides all the time. So since I've been in politics, and I'll go back to my years at Lawton High, it has gotten even more negative and vitriolic every single election cycle. And I think there's a lot of temptation for your consultant or your campaign manager to dictate how you talk and how you campaign. And so that's why last year in the general election, I had the a campaign ad that I presented to the voters, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. And that, for those who hadn't watched it, it basically poked fun at. We have consultants that we oftentimes hire, and they tell us what to do and what types of mailers to send. And the message for that commercial was that I am who I am, and the voters will make that determination if I'm the right person to be elected. So I do think you have to trust that voters are sophisticated and want to make sure that you have candidates who uphold a high standard of public service and not get down in the mud just to win a campaign. It's just not worth it. That's how I've always felt about negative campaigning. And I personally find it amusing anytime that I do get one of those mailers that has photoshopped me, and I just think like, man, like surely that time and money could have been spent on another program or initiative. But we're all different, and that's the way I see it when it comes to campaigning. And for 7 years now, I've been okay.
Okay, Representative Pae, last question. We see a lot of talk online, as well as from some pundits on partisan media, stating that they do believe we are close to the start of a second civil war. But what do you see? I know we don't have a crystal ball to look into the future or anything like that, but what do you see for this nation, especially in terms of political civility? Do you see us coming together or pushing further apart?
Yeah. So I mean, uh, I've always believed that governing should be like riding a bike. When you ride a bike, you can't lean too far to the left or too far to the right. You have to be balanced, and I think more people than not sincerely believe in that approach to governing. If you disagree with someone of the opposite political party, they're your opponent, they're not your enemy. And we do have foreign adversaries all over the world who truly hate us and do want to see the worst possible outcome for our country. But we should never get to the point as the United States where the us versus them dynamic has split to the point where we're no longer talking and working together. If you look at other defense and national security officials, they point to hyper polarization as a national security threat. Because if we can't agree on common objectives on how do we move forward on any given conflict or situation, we can't govern, and that's what's going to tear us apart. Um, I don't think there's a point of no return at the moment. I think we do have that choice to make, and I'm hopeful that in light of what's happened this summer, because if you think about in the beginning, you had the assassinations in Minnesota against state legislators, and then recently with Charlie Kirk. So political violence has unfortunately become normalized in some ways this year, and then last year, of course, with the two assassination attempts against President Trump. And we do have become desensitized. And there was a period where we did acknowledge we've gone too far and we can't let this happen again. But because of the short-term attention span we have now as a society, with social media, with the 24-hour news cycle, it's hard to think long-term, and it's hard to comprehend and truly reflect on any given event that's taking place. We're always moving on to the next scandal or controversy or headline. And so I do hope that we can try to challenge ourselves to reflect and to do those deep dives on policy matters and to embrace nuance. And like we said earlier in our conversation, talk to our neighbors, our friends, and our families, and maintain those open lines of communication. I think if we do all those things, we'll be okay. I'm not ready to say that things are going to escalate to the point of no return and that we're going to be at a truly troubling point as a country. I'm not going to rule that out entirely because you never know. And it's hard to make accurate predictions these days. But my gut tells me that in the long run, we'll be okay. And at least in Oklahoma, I can certainly say because of the Oklahoma Standard, that will be our guiding principle in the years to come. And certainly after I leave elected office and public service, I do believe that my colleagues who are still in the legislature will remember that and remember that what happened in 1995 with the bombing, that cannot be repeated. We cannot get to that point again. So I am hopeful about Oklahoma's future, and I still remain hopeful about America's future too.
Representative Pae, thank you so much for joining me for this very important conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin.
Well, that was my conversation with Oklahoma Representative Daniel Pae on the importance of political civility. As you heard, civility isn't about avoiding disagreement. It's about how we choose to engage with one another, whether it's at the Capitol, in our neighborhoods, or even in the comment sections online. In a time when divisions can feel overwhelming, Representative Pae's perspective reminds us that respectful dialogue is still very much possible, and that it starts with the choices we make every single day. Thanks for joining me on this episode of For the Record. Until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Justin Allen Rose.